Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to Deliver It. This is an Agile Product Owners Podcast. I'm Cory, that's Kim. She's smiling because...
Because your welcome message is always so exciting.
I need to do something different.
I think you need to come up with some new words.
Some new words? Mm-hmm. Just anything?
Like greetings and salutations. I'm over it. Let's find something else.
Okay.
Can you do that for next time?
You suggest... Why don't you do it next time? Why don't you intro the show next time?
Yeah, why don't you just put the ball in my court? Nah.
You like a lot of that we stuff, so we need to.
We need to, and I say we, I really mean you. Ask my husband. We need to clean up the porch.
We need to come up with a new intro for the show, Kim. What are you going to do about it? What's happening?
Oh, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night.
No, what's...
I had one of those dreams that you have when I have a presentation coming up. Uh-huh. It's not that big of a deal. I'm just doing some, training on what we just did. And in the dream, my, 20 audience turned into like an audience of 90. And they're all filling out, they're all kind of piled out the door.
Right.
Everybody's on top of each other. The go-to meeting doesn't work. The projector's broken. The phone that I'm dialing in is like a beeping tone. Mm-hmm. Everybody's getting impatient and hot and frustrated. I lose all my notes. I find more notes, and all of a sudden it's like a newspaper, and I'm like, these aren't my notes. And I'm like freaking out. Finally, about halfway in, it's literally like 40 minutes in, I crack a joke. I'm like, okay, let's get going because we got everything working.
40 minutes in.
40 minutes in.
Right.
I go through one feature, and then all of a sudden people are leaving. And I'm like, where are you going? And they're like, time's up. Gotta go to another meeting. And I woke up in cold sweats and it's like,
wow,
that was the worst presentation ever.
Work dreams are the worst.
Agreed.
Stress, because they're usually stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm not really stressed about it, but maybe subconsciously, I don't know.
I don't know. Either.
Anyway, it had me up from about 3 to about 4:15 this morning.
That's not good. Mm-hmm. No.
Anyway.
I've been looking at ways to create apps without code. Huh? How about that?
I'm looking up in the air.
Okay.
How is that done?
Basically templates.
Oh.
For like iOS or Android type devices or something like that. Because I don't code. I don't want to learn to code. I probably should. I probably could if I wanted to. But I just want to create some quick things and see if they're possible. So I'm looking at lots of things that you can do without learning coding skills that people have done all that. And of course you pay them for it, for the templates. But it's in a way to get out a pretty simplistic app out to do something.
Awesome.
Like a podcast app.
Oh.
Who knows?
Oh.
Who knows?
I know you're always creating something.
I'm looking. So, yeah.
You're doing your research.
Yeah. And I tell you, I got inspired by an article I read by William Chang. And he was blogging about how his company, which is Crashlytics.
Wait, is his name William?
William Chang.
You sure it's William?
No, it's Wayne Chang.
Wayne.
Yes.
Sorry, Wayne.
Sorry, Wayne. Wayne Chang had a blog talking about his company, Crashlytics, and it's a good story. It's not anything specific. It's just an inspiring story to talk about how a startup company had a product and how that product evolved and how they grew that product. It got acquired by Twitter. They were bought, and then how it kind of morphed into something more and the success they had with it. It's a great kind of weaving of we thought this and this was true and we dedicated ourselves to this. We didn't spend every minute building features. We spent a good amount of time. They did the 80-20, the Pareto rule, and the 20% that they didn't spend building features that nobody really wanted, they spent on scaling. And at the end of the day, it's a very good article. We'll put it in the show notes. But at the end of the day, they were able to process 5 billion sessions a day in real time with a very dynamic and rich UI experience. And they were able to see the numbers themselves. They were able to give their customers insights and answers, which is the name of their product, to what their products were doing, how they were crashing. And then, numbers that they cared about, daily feeds, total number of new monthly users, and stuff like that. But it was very, very good blog post, very long blog post. It talked a lot about their attention to detail, how they fretted over animations and styling and the logos and launching of the product, which they changed 2 days before they launched it. They changed the name.
That's agile.
Yeah. The emotion that they wanted that product to elicit with their users. And they got a hook, right? They the first product they had, they dedicated 100% of their effort to how to tell for developers, how to tell when their app crashed, what happened to it. They dedicated themselves to that, got that worked out, and then they started building the analytics engines that would report all these things that other products do, but this one did differently. And their users loved it, and they got acquired, and they got more business, and they processed 5 billion sessions a day. It's just amazing. It's a very good story. I like it.
Oh, very good.
So we'll put it in there. Again, Wayne Chang.
Wayne
Chang.
Chang.
And I read it a couple times, and once again today, so I make sure I wouldn't screw up the name. And what happens?
You call him William.
I screw up the name.
But aren't you glad that I was here to say, what was his name again?
Yes.
Because then people be like, I can't find anything from William Chang.
Constantly.
And who knows who William Chang
glad
really
that
is.
you're here to correct me.
I know. You're very welcome. I'm happy to help.
Except every other Monday.
That will never end.
No. So, did you read anything interesting? Did I give you any assignments?
You did not give me any assignments. Therefore, I did not read anything interesting because I wasn't forced to.
Okay. That's fine. We do have a topic today.
Velocity.
What?
Velocity.
No.
No. Oh, it sounds kind of fun.
Okay, so this is going to be pretty deep, technically speaking, or deep topic. Velocity calculations.
I don't think that's that deep.
You don't think it's that deep? Why not?
No.
Do you do velocity calculations?
Of course I do.
Okay.
I can do math.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can math properly.
I can math.
Okay.
As long as it's simple math.
As long as it's simple math. No, we're not talking about anything too complicated here.
No.
Again, simple wins. So let's do the simple thing.
That's right.
There's lots of different ways to do this, but let's talk about what it is firstly. We're not going to get into a lot of planning activities with this topic. That's going to be a separate, so sprint planning and everything else. We're just going to talk about the basics of velocity calculations, how you actually do them, what they're there for, some tips and tricks.
What the purpose is, why do we need them?
But we're not going to get into sprint planning as a part of velocity calculations yet.
No, but we definitely need to talk about sprint. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
Okay.
Okay. So velocity calculations, what they are, it's basically a way to determine how much work a team can get done in a sprint.
I noticed how you said team.
A team, one team.
The A team?
No, not the A team, but one single team. We're going to calculate velocity for in our example. We're going to talk about scaling later, but simple definition, it's how much work one team can get done in a sprint. So basically, it's the size of all the stories that you've completed in a sprint, summed up, that's your velocity, whatever that is. It's going to be a prediction. So we're assuming this is going to be wrong. We just don't know how wrong it's going to be. But it's a good guideline. It's a good guardrail to put in place. We can apply these to sprints. We can also apply these to releases if you want to. If you've got enough release backlog history to do this with, you can definitely do it with releases as well as sprints. And it's going to fluctuate. It's going to be up and down. It's going to move on you, and that's okay. We should expect it to move a little bit. We want it to move a little bit. We don't want it to be a year at the same level or the same numbers that we're calculating. We want it to grow or to change based on what we're doing, teams getting better, new technologies, all that stuff.
Right. So we talked about we don't want it to change too drastically. So we want subtle changes. We don't want roller coaster changes in the velocity. So velocity is important because we need to communicate what the expected plan is to others. So our management team, our stakeholders, or whoever. So essentially we want to look at, given the current backlog, we can estimate the number of iterations it will take to complete a set of stories, knowing what the velocity is. Mm-hmm. And we'll also have a pretty good idea as to how many story points the team can deliver by a certain date. So, if we're asked, well, how many features can you give us before the trade show? We can look at our velocity and look at our stories and say, okay, you're going to get A through C.
Right.
Right. So it's important that we know what our velocity is so that we can identify which stories need to be broken down into smaller increments. So, for example, if the velocity is 20 and maybe we have stories that have 25 points, maybe we can break that 5-point story down to a 2 and a 3 and then maybe add that to the side for a stretch.
Yeah. Basically, while we're creating our stories with our customers and our clients and everything else we're doing with our stories, if we know that a story is bigger than a sprint because of our velocity, we know we need to break that down.
Yep.
And so this gives us kind of a guideline to say, oh, this story's too big for a sprint. We need to do something else with it.
Right.
Yeah. So There's lots of different ways to do this, and everybody's going to have their own different way. I'll tell you some of the ways that I've done it and some of the ways that I've seen people recommend. So if you're in a sprint 0 or sprint 1 and you have no velocity, so let's start with new team, new product, no velocity. What do? Well, you don't have a velocity, so there's very little calculation that you can do, but you can make your best guess with that team. So you put your stories on the wall, you figure out what they think they can do in the sprint time length, if it's 2 weeks or whatever, and you come out with, okay, this is what we think we're going to do in the sprint. After that sprint, that becomes your baseline for your velocity. So if you put 4 or 5 stories on the wall, the team says that's 30 points. Then after the first sprint, or when you're planning for the second sprint, you can try to plan as a product owner 30 points worth of stories.
30 points.
Now, understand that that's wrong, right? It's not going to be 30.
But it's something.
But it's something to go off of. And until you have more history, which is what the velocity calculations are based on, at least all the ones that I've done, is based on prior history. So you have to have history before you can do a calculation. In order to get to a history, you have to do a sprint. And then when you have that, then you keep going. And you keep track of these as your product owner. You keep track of these. Your Scrum Master will help, hopefully. Your Agile coaches will help. But as a product owner, I always want to know how many points our team can do in a sprint.
I agree.
You're going to make your best guess. There's going to be a little bit of math. A lot of people like to do averages. So if I've got 10 sprints and I've done 20 points, or my average is 20. Mm-hmm. So they're going to say our velocity is 20. That's okay.
Sure.
That's great. If you've got that, then use that. But I think there's a better way to do it, and it's one that Mike Cohn has shown on his website and shown in his product owner training. And it's a way to calculate a 90% confidence level in your velocity calculations. So here's how you do it. So basically we're going to take the last couple sprints, and we have to have between 8 and up to do this.
Okay.
So the first 5 to 7 sprints, you're either going to do, the average, or you're going to do the range that you've got. I'll talk about one more after I do this. I forgot one. So basically, after sprint 8, we're going to start throwing out sprints. So we're going to take on sprint 8 and sprint 9, so every 2 thereafter, we're going to throw out our high and our low. And we're going to give a range. So that range is what we're going to plan to. Okay? So I'll give an example. So let's say we have 10 sprints, and I'll go through this, and we'll put it out there. So 10 sprints. Let's say we have 40, 47, 34, 41, 41, 40, 42, 38, 39, and 37. Okay, so those are our 10 sprint velocities that we've done. Everything has remained pretty much the same. Okay?
Again, just pointing out that this is the number of story points that was completed in the sprint.
In the sprint, right. Completed.
And completed.
Yes.
In the sprint.
Done.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to reiterate that.
So of those 10, we're going to throw out 34 because that was the low. And we're going to throw out 47 because that was the high.
Why are we doing this?
Because we want to get to a 90% confidence range. We don't want to have as big a range as possible. We want to have as realistic a range as possible.
So without throwing it out, what's our percentage?
Percentage.
Right. So you said we want 90%.
Yeah.
So without throwing out those two
numbers. I don't know.
Just curious.
I don't know at what point, although that's something you could probably figure is we have 100% confidence in these numbers.
Right.
We have 50% confidence in these numbers, which is probably the best thing to do. And it limits, what you take in the sprint. Do you want us to have 100% confidence if you're in an industry or in a company that has to have that?
Right.
Then, you're going to move that line back to where you feel comfortable doing 100%. If you feel like you need to be 90% confident, which is where I like to be, then I feel like these numbers kind of hit there. Mm-hmm. And this is what I did on the project that, we did for 2 years.
Sure.
This is the way that I did the velocity calculations. Mm-hmm. So we threw out 37 because it was low. We threw out 42 because it was high. So, we threw out 34 and we threw out 47. So what we're left with is a range. And in that range, we have 37 to 42. So when I'm planning a sprint for that team, I'm going to plan to 37 points, and I'm going to have stretch to 42.
Okay.
Now, there is an average there, so my average is 40. So we're going to do, pretty confident, we're going to do between 37 and 42 points in the next sprint and the sprint after that. And we're going to keep updating this. But as far as what I, as a product owner, am writing stories for and getting prepared to do and telling people you can have this by this date, it's based off that calculation.
I usually give the average. So I see what you're saying with the ranges. I usually look at the average, and that's what I make the baseline of what I assume that they'll be able to deliver.
So is that what you plan to, is the
That's
average?
what I plan to,
Or
is
at
the
least that's
average.
what you go into planning with, is the average.
That's correct. Okay. That's what I do. But I keep all my sprints. I've had, upwards of 15, 18 sprints that I've kept the rolling average for. But I've never thrown out the high and the low. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. And it's because those are anomalies, right? We want to try to get rid of the anomalies. You may have something where there was something easier than the team figured out. In that case, it was 47. The average is 40. The next highest is 42. That was an extra story or something that they got done that they didn't plan on doing. And then the low is a 34. That's a story that got dropped or something like that. So any failed sprints or something like that is typically what that would signify is we're throwing out that.
Right. And what I also do with my velocity is I also keep a running total of what they committed to. So I can see, all right, we committed to 37 and we failed and only made 35.
Right.
So I've got this chart that graphs both of those numbers so I can kind of see where we're at throughout a long period of time. It's interesting. It's interesting to show the team.
Yeah. I try it both ways. Try it different ways and see which one makes more sense, which one kind of lines up, and see what you can try it different ways. That's the big thing is just try it. But basically that gives you a 9% confidence that velocity for the remaining iterations is a certain range. So 37 to 42. Now, again, for most of the velocity calculations as a product owner, these are my numbers.
Right.
These are the team's numbers as well, but they don't go, unless I'm in a very understanding organization, they don't go beyond myself and the team because, again, that's where product managers and project managers start playing math with the numbers.
That's all right.
And if you're doing numbers, that's okay, but I would definitely not want to share these with people and start going, well, your velocity needs to increase 3% per quarter per year in order to justify blah, 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 blah. Right? I hate that. This is just for the team. This is just how we plan. And this is just a way to make sure that we plan the right amount of stuff. But always have stretch stories, I think, in your velocity calculations. You always want to see these numbers. So in this case, I range from 37 to 42. Yes, we'd like to see that average or that range go up, but we'd like to see that go up naturally.
Right.
And having stretch stories can help that.
Right. It should be organic and it should be a nice gradual increase. So if, one day they're doing 18 story points in a sprint and the next sprint they're up to 55.
Yeah.
That's cause for suspect.
Yeah. But again, so in this case, I would plan enough stories for 37. That's what I'd bring into the sprint.
Right.
I'd also have enough to go up to 42 just because that's my range. And then I'd have a few stretch stories on the side. So as far as the stories that I get ready for planning, I'm using this velocity to drive what I'm bringing into sprint planning for the team.
Yep.
And I'll give you another example. So one of the first couple sprints we had, so our velocity on our first sprint was 30. Second sprint was 8.
Okay.
Third sprint was 27. Fourth sprint was 13. Just by those numbers, 38, 27, and 13, what do you think was happening?
I have no idea when they were failing their sprints.
They were failing the second sprint.
Right.
And the following sprint,
They were completing
they were completing that work. So their actual velocity was probably somewhere in the high teens or mid-teens. But because it was a sawtooth, it was up and it was down and it was up and it was down. There was no consistency.
Right.
It was a roller coaster. Right?
So as a PO, what can you do to eliminate that?
Start taking back stories.
Taking back stories or making them smaller?
Both. Yeah. So if they can only do 18, 15, whatever, that's what you give them. And you try to make sure that that's the work that gets done. You make sure it's groomed by the team. You make sure that you understand why they failed previous sprints. Why didn't they get those stories done? And why do they have to be brought into the next sprint and completed there? But that was the first couple rocky sprints that we had. And then we got churning and got better at velocity calculations and prediction. And the teams got better too. And then things started to flow.
Right. I mean, and there are a lot of things that influence velocity as well.
Right.
So if it's a brand new project with new technology that they've never used,
Right.
that's going to slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's some sort of, I don't know, roadblocks that they're not aware of and impediments that come across their way, it's going to slow them down too. So my point is that there's always going to be something that you're not prepared for.
Right.
That may affect the velocity.
Yeah. And the velocity is just about the stories. It's not about how you plan the sprints. Again, it's just, there's going to be lots of things that go on during the sprints that the velocity calculations aren't a part of.
Yep.
It's just the stories and how many stories do I need to prepare as a product owner to put in the next sprint.
So what happens when you have stories that, maybe some product owners don't put points to stories. Maybe they give them T-shirt sizes.
Yeah. So I think there's a way that we can convert those types of things. The calculations I know how to do, and I think I'm really good at that. And I was really proud that I was really good at that for a while until I said, well, this really doesn't matter, because if we're not delivering anything and if we're constantly in arguments, it doesn't matter how good I am at calculating velocities.
Right.
So I can do it, and you product owners should be able to calculate your velocities and do that stuff, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to figure out how you can translate something the team is actually doing and they're comfortable with to get to the point where you can be comfortable calculating the velocity for you and for the team. So if you're not doing estimations at all,
you need to start.
No.
Oh, that's the wrong answer.
You need to start. You can start, but again, if your team's not comfortable with it or however level they're doing, we need to find a way to translate these things, convert these things. So if it's just stories per sprint, so if you're just doing 5 stories, 6 stories, whatever per sprint, you can base it off of that. If you're doing t-shirt sizes, so if you've got large stories and small stories and extra medium stories, I heard somebody say one day.
Extra medium.
That made me laugh. I've never heard of.
There is no such thing.
Extra medium.
That's because there's no such thing.
So you can convert. You and your coach and your scrum master can figure out, okay, a large means an 8-point story or whatever you come out with. And again, it's for you and it's for you to drive these calculations.
So if they're estimating in zoo animals.
Yeah.
Fine. You could say a mouse is, 2 points.
Yes.
And a lion is 5.
Yep. But
an elephant is 8.
And again, it's just for you and your team to figure out this stuff.
That's right.
I've done it before where I've had to abstract these things. So I gave them a number of buckets, and here's your bucket size, and here's things that can go in the bucket, and that's too big for the bucket that can't go in. And oh, by the way, the bucket has a lid and has to close, so you can't
overflow the bucket.
You can't overflow the bucket. Just because it fits doesn't mean it's going. So again, any way you can do it to get it to a point where you can use a number to calculate the velocity, find a way to do it.
Simple math.
Yeah, simple math again. There's lots of talk about normalizing velocities across teams. SAFe pretty much mandates this. They say, okay, a 8-point story is X amount of man days, X amount of developers, or whatever, and that's 8. And it says that's for no matter how many teams you have.
No matter who's on the team.
No matter who's on the team.
What their experience level is.
Same.
Uh-huh.
I don't like that at all.
I don't like that either.
So I'd say don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Because realistically, when you have 2 teams or multiple teams, an 8-point story for team A is not going to be an 8-point story for team B. They have different experience. They have different goals, different products sometimes, or sometimes different areas of that same product that they're working on. So I always like to look at it as capacity. So if I have multiple teams, then I'm going to convert that to a capacity number and then do my calculations on that.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that so in my company, we typically have 2-week sprints, but then there are times when we have a 3-week sprint within that release. Maybe, it's a, I don't know, hardening sprint, let's say, or something. Yeah. It's a 3-weeker. So the way I do that is I actually calculate my velocity by weeks and then multiply by the number of weeks in that sprint. It's a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
But that way I can see, okay, well, because they'll get more points done, in a 3-week sprint than they would a 2-week sprint.
That's true.
So how do you kind of keep that rolling average? How do you know what they really got within that 3-week sprint as opposed to a 2-week sprint?
Typically, anytime the team or process changes, then my velocity calculations are going to change. So if you're changing so often.
But if it's a one-off every release, let's say, we've got.
You're talking about like a hardening sprint?
Sure.
I wouldn't plan for any velocity during a hardening sprint.
So you wouldn't even use those numbers?
No, because a hardening sprint is just defect fixes and stuff getting ready to get it out the door, right?
That's what you would want your hardening sprint to be, yes.
Okay. Is that not what you're talking about?
Sure, Cory. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I don't believe you. But yeah, finding a way to do this when you've got so many changes. So I got really good at this. I can do this. But when I get 2 people jerked off my team and 2 new people, put on, is it time to recalculate the velocity? Is it time to throw away the old velocities and start
Probably.
new? Yeah. If it's one person, probably not. If it's 3 or 4.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. You have to start over. So yes, you may have 10 weeks or 10 sprints of beautiful velocity numbers that you got really good at calculating, and then you have to start over, and that sucks, but that's what you have to do.
Well, and then also if the sprint cadence changes dramatically too, if they're going every 2 weeks to now every 3 weeks, then the velocity has to get thrown out the door and you need to start again.
Yep, absolutely.
Which is a bummer.
It is a bummer, but that's okay because hopefully that should be once, right? Okay, we're changing our cadence from 2-week sprints to 3-week sprints. On this day, we throw away our velocity numbers and we start tracking new velocity numbers. Mm-hmm. That's what you should do.
Right.
Hopefully you're not doing, okay, we're going to do a 2-week sprint here and a 3-week sprint here. And we're going to do a 2-week sprint here because we've got features and blah, blah, blah. Keep your cadence steady. This is one of the reasons to do that is your calculations.
Okay, I'm going to throw something out here that's going to be a little controversial.
Ooh. Hang on.
Are you ready?
Okay, go.
So we've talked about how we should have completed stories, and that's what we allow our velocity to be counted on. Mm-hmm. What about defects?
Yeah. I don't think it's controversial.
I think it depends who you talk to.
I don't give defects points. What I typically do, and this is a different conversation, I think, but it's fine to ask because part of the flow.
We're here to talk.
We're here to talk. What I do typically is kind of give a bucket for defects. So I'll give a time bucket and then start putting defects in there until the team says that's all we can put in that bucket.
Do you assign points to your bucket?
If it's in a hardening sprint, no. If it's in a regular sprint, yes, I would.
Would you? Mm-hmm. Even though that the defects were developed from them? I mean, the reason we have defects is because they didn't code well.
Well, you have a defect. You can have a defect from any reason.
True.
Right? So if defects are escaping because you're not getting your stories done, then that's a problem. That's a different problem. If you have a defect and you have a collection of defects that you need to put into a release, if you're releasing every sprint, then I would put them as part of a story, a defect story, point that story, and then have that done as part of the work. And if it's in a hardening sprint, which is just what can we do to get it out the door, and it's unstructured, really, then I wouldn't point them out. Just say, look, these are the things we need to get done and get it done. So.
I'm okay. I mean, that's what we used to do.
Are you okay
right?
with that?
No, I'm totally cool with that. I have no problems with putting points to bugs and giving it a little bucket, a bug bucket.
Bug bucket?
I have no problems with that.
Good.
But some people may. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
That's right. Okay, so what else? And it should improve, as we said. So
it should improve.
We should grow organically, but not mandated 3% every quarter.
And it's our job is to keep an eye on the velocity as product owners.
Mm-hmm.
Don't close your eyes to velocity.
Yeah.
And if you see weird jumps, discuss it in the retrospective.
That's your pulse. That's your really, okay, how are we doing? How are we doing? Are we going consistently enough? I'm a big fan of consistency. Again, that's that sawtooth example I gave you. I'd much rather have a consistent 16 points every sprint or 15 to 18 point range than 8 to 30 to 27. I'd much rather have that consistency because it helps me plan better.
Right.
And again, planning is useful. So, okay. So there was an article I read, and I'll post a link to the article that had some questions about velocity and whether or not they were, or some opening questions about velocity. So I thought we'd go through those a little bit and see what we think.
Sure.
You want to take the first one?
Should we have individual velocity?
So individual velocity, meaning should we give a developer, he can do X
Tom
number
can do 8 points and
per sprint.
Chad can do 12 points per sprint.
Don't do that.
Why?
Because it's a horrible individual metric. Because again, I'm not interested in managing or the performance of developers. What I'm interested in doing is getting work done for the team, for the sprint.
Team.
Yeah. So individuals make up the team, but don't monitor them at an individual velocity. That's a bad idea. So again, should velocity be used as a metric for productivity?
No.
No. Your team may be producing a lot of stuff, but it may be the wrong stuff. So that's your responsibility as a product owner to make sure they're doing the right thing and to make sure they're doing it well, that it's technically good enough. But it just the numbers alone should not be a metric for productivity.
Should it be used for iteration planning?
Yes.
Duh.
Come on, Kim.
Of course.
What about longer term release planning?
Kind of.
Yeah, I like doing it that. Again, I know I can do, between 37 and 42 points a sprint. I know my backlog is 600 points total, let's say. So I know I can get through this many sprints in this release or by this month or what have you.
And I like metrics.
Metrics are useful.
I can't say things like, well, intuitively, I believe my team can do this. Because it's intuitively. They want to see some cold, hard facts.
Yep.
So I can show them some cold, hard facts with my velocity numbers.
Yep. And again,
bam,
you control those. Product owner.
That's right.
Kim.
That's correct.
And let's see. Should it be used at all, or is it a wasteful practice?
I don't think it's a wasteful practice.
I don't either. But I don't think it's the be-all, end-all. It's a good addition.
It's in your toolbox.
It's
one of your tools in your toolbox.
Absolutely. It could be misused, or it could be used to benefit you or the team. So I think used correctly, it's a very valuable tool.
That's correct.
Yay, velocity.
Yay, velocity.
And there's I'm going to screw up and say that one time, and I'm going to hate you for
Their
it.
velocity is 32 points. Damn you, Kim.
Now, the way I talked about that Mike showed to do the velocity calculation, 90%, he actually has on his website, Mountain Goat Software, we'll put a link to this in the show notes, a online tool that lets you enter those velocities, and then they will give you that number, that range that I gave you. So you can put your things in, and he will spit out for you the number using his methodology.
That is mighty nice.
Mighty nice. It's a very simple tool.
Thanks, Mike.
Very good. Mike's got good stuff.
That's pretty cool. So you're going to put that online too, right?
Yes, it's very good.
So people that don't like math, it's good for them.
Yes.
That'd be great for me. I should totally start
Just
using that.
enter some numbers and be done with it. All right.
I guess that about wraps up velocity. Velocity.
Again with the singing.
So if you've got any questions or feedback about the PO space, let us know.
And you can find us at deliveritcast.com, on Twitter at deliveritcast, or you can email us at deliveritcast@gmail.com.
So look at you. You're now starting to sing.
God.
I knew I'd rub off on you eventually. I may even go watch a movie. So we had some questions from listeners, Greg and Tim. So Greg and Tim are a little upset.
Yeah.
Because the episodes are showing up out of order, or they're not showing up at all.
Yeah, so...
What is up with that, Cory?
I'm sure it's totally my fault.
Of course it's your fault.
I could blame you.
No, you can't. You cannot blame me.
I'd like to.
I know, but you can't.
I think what's happened is that as I'm learning, because this is my first podcast, this is my first time trying to produce a show and do things like that, I've managed to screw something up. But I will go back tonight for this episode that we post and figure out why either the episodes are showing up out of order or they're not showing up at all. I checked on iTunes and it looks like all 10 are there, but Tim in particular said that he thinks we haven't done an episode in 2 months.
He said he's listened to episode 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I said, there's 3 through 10 you haven't even touched.
Yeah. So if I've screwed up your player or your service that you use to listen to the show, please let me know so I can figure out what I've done.
And then Cory can repair it.
And then I can fix it. And then hopefully we won't have these problems.
Because if you got a problem, I'll solve it.
Again, with the Vanilla Ice references. You're a hateful woman. So I promise I will try to fix the episode ordering and the episode listings and all that stuff.
Please do. Because it's making us look very unprofessional.
I know. If you have any other, I'm not a professional podcaster. I'm sorry. Very few things I'm a professional at.
You're a podcast amateur.
Yes. So if you have any other technical issues like that, please let me know because I want to try to fix them because that's the way I get better. You give me feedback. I go and figure out what horrible thing I've done. I fix it and then the world is right again.
Yeah. But that's good feedback though, because if no one tells us, we're not going to know.
And
we're going to assume everything is hunky-dory.
Right. So thank you for that, Greg and Tim.
Thanks, Greg and Tim. If you ever get to this episode.
If you ever see this episode in your feed, we hope we've answered your question. All right. Anything else?
I think it's disclaimer time.
All right. Hang on.
There's the music.
There we go. All right. These words are our own. Tim and Cory. They are not endorsed or representative of any company or organization. But again, if you've listened this far, you got to understand that, right? You can find me online at @iscoreybryan on Twitter or infrequently blogging at don'tYellAtMe.wordpress.com.
And as always, I can be reached through the show contact information.
We just delivered episode number 10.
Number 10!
10 episodes.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much for joining us and for the other episodes.
Yes.
And we will see you next time.
On episode 11.
Bye-bye.
Later.